In this episode, I fly solo as I talk to Erin Spurling from the Child-Free Lounge. Erin's mission is to change the conversation for and about women who choose to embrace a child-free lifestyle, whether that's by choice or circumstance. Myself and Erin speak about some of the misconceptions of being child-free and why we feel it's important to speak about our choices to empower more women, and indeed men, to live child-free, unapologetically, confidently, and without judgment.
Hi, I'm James Davis.
And I'm Claire Davis.
We're the Midlife Mentors, here to lift the lid on how to achieve health and happiness.
The balanced, no-nonsense way. Hello, this is Claire from the Midlife Mentors. Welcome to another podcast episode. I'm actually flying solo today because I'm actually interviewing a lovely lady called Erin, and she runs the Child-Free Lounge. I was going to invite James onto this, but then I just thought, you know what? I end up gabbling, and he sits there thinking that he shouldn't be there. So we've just got Erin and myself today. So welcome, Erin. It's such a joy to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I'm just going to do a little intro for Erin. So previously a content writer and editor, in 2021, Erin founded the Child-Free Lounge, a membership for women embracing a child-free lifestyle. Speaking out and creating this membership is about positivity, friendship, connections, education, support, reducing loneliness, increasing confidence, and now allowing all women to proudly own their lives and their decisions. Erin hopes to change the conversation for and about child-free women, to reduce judgment and make it more inclusive and positive. Boom! I love that. That's amazing, Erin. What you're doing is so important.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be doing it, actually. It's something that was sort of bubbled away in my mind for, God, it must be about a decade now, and I just never acted on it. And I got to a point and I thought, no, I need to do something with this.
Yeah, well, I'm going to explain like how obviously we met, online, but then we did meet up just before I left for Marbella, which was lovely. But in a nutshell, I was following some of the stuff that you were doing on Instagram, and being child-free myself, some of the stuff, well, a lot of the stuff that you were talking about really resonated with me. And I thought it was a really important community of women that you're pulling together. And so asked you to meet up and see what we could do together. And then obviously I was on your Instagram live fairly recently, a couple of weeks ago. And it was the first time that I have ever openly spoken about being child-free. So I kept saying to you, thank you so much for opening my heart to being a bit more vulnerable about why I decided to be child-free. So thank you again, Erin, for doing that live with me on Instagram. If you haven't checked it out, I'll put that in the link in the show notes as well, because that was on Erin's Instagram page. But it was my first dabble really about being honest and open about why I haven't had children and what resulted in me not having children. And so many people then opened up and reached out to me. So
that's amazing.
That's all through what you're doing, and it inspired me to speak about it. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing it, because it was, I know, you'd already said to me that it's the first time you'd spoken publicly about it and everything. So it was really nice to share that with you.
Absolutely. So what made you set up the Child-Free Lounge, Erin? What was going on?
Well, like I say, it's kind of an idea I had for a long time. I have always, I feel like I've kind of always known I don't want to have children. And then it wasn't obviously not really so much of an issue when I was younger, because I was still meeting people through school and university. And then beyond that, I started to think, it'd be really nice if there was a place I could go and meet people who I knew were like of a similar mind to me with regards to that, because obviously as you start to get older and more of your friends and family start to have children, that understandably changes their lives and their commitments and how they can spend their time. And yeah, I never acted on it. I think, as you and I both know, social media can be an amazing place to meet people and make connections, but it can also be a bit of a scary place. And just because of reactions I've had to that decision in my own personal life and things I know that have happened to other people, I thought I would just be kind of opening a can of worms online, basically. But as I've got older, I've just become more and more confident and more aware of how much this needs to be talked about, and the judgment that we face, the stereotypes. And I think that's true of all women, not just those of us that are choosing to not have children. And I felt that something needed to change. But then on top of that, when COVID hit, and obviously a lot of parents were homeschooling and trying to work, and I just don't know how they have done that.
Nor do I. Absolute, like they all deserve medals.
Yes. So understandably, in a lot of the Facebook groups and things that I was part of, conversation would drift towards children and, oh my God, how do I homeschool and do this? And, which I completely understand. And although I could have empathy for that, I couldn't really contribute to those conversations from a, oh yeah, I've done this or I'm doing that perspective, from a first-hand perspective. So then I started to see more and more people sort of saying the same things, I suppose, as me, and saying, I can sort of empathize with you, but I can't help you because I don't have children. And so conversations started to come up, and I shared something as part of my previous business when I was doing content about being child-free, and that prompted quite a lot of responses, a bit like I think you found off of the back of our Instagram live. I was starting to get DMs and people saying, oh, nobody ever talks about this, and I feel like I can't say anything because people judge me. And I thought, you know what, I think it's time to act on this idea that's been rolling around in my head for 10 years. So so it's kind of a combination of personal experience plus everything that was going on with lockdown and stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think so many women will be able to relate to that. And what was lovely when I went out and spoke about this off the back of our live, there were so many women friends, people I've met online that have children that were like, my goodness, it's how have you ever been judged for deciding not to have children? I don't understand it. And it was also off the back, obviously, I do a lot of menopause stuff, peri-menopause and menopause workshops. And one of the organizers for one of the events that I was reaching out to share some of my knowledge, she said, do you have children? And I said no. And she said, I don't think the women will be able to relate to you if you haven't had children. And I couldn't actually believe it. I was gobsmacked. And then actually the vulnerability piece for me was thinking, is that an issue for certain women that might want to work with me? And it was good, because I always want to learn and grow and understand some of my own personal pains and personal things that need to be worked on. And I thought, is that something that I need to address? Am I worried? Have I not really thought about the fact that I might be worried that some women don't understand me or don't want to work with me because I don't have children, and they think that I won't understand them? So that opened up quite a lot of inner work, really, for me, thinking, is that something that's held me back going out there and talking about it? That if I go out there and talk about it, some women will think, oh, what? She hasn't got children? Oh, how's she going to understand me?
Yeah. I think it does play on people's minds, and I think it depends on the reactions you've had. I think if you've always had positive, supportive reactions to sharing that, then perhaps it's less of an issue for you. But I think if you have had any sort of negative response, it can make you nervous. Like, I know when I was much younger, I felt really confident in how I felt about having children. But that sort of like late teens, early 20s, the vast majority of the times that I would share that opinion with people, I was always met with, you'll change your mind, you'll meet the right man, different, or your body clock will start ticking and all of that kind of thing. So I did for a while. Anytime somebody said, oh, do you think you'll have kids? I was like, yeah, maybe one day, even though in my head I was thinking,
yeah,
probably not, but I wouldn't voice
yeah.
that because I just didn't want to have to deal with, those comments and endlessly having to justify myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's always been a judgment that I've seen in various people, in various places online, where people say, oh, it's really selfish. It's really selfish not to have children. That's one of the
It's so common.
main things I've heard is, oh, it's a bit selfish not to have children. And also, what are you going to do when you're older? What are you going to do when you're older? And I'm thinking, what do you mean, what am I going to do when I'm older? That's no reason to have a child. What, I'm going to have a child because I want to be looked after in my old age. That's selfish.
Yes.
Thinking about yourself, wanting to be looked after when you're older, rather than actually thinking, you know what, I'm going to make my own way in this world and I'll be responsible for myself. I don't want someone else being responsible for me when I'm older necessarily. So it was, those are the most common things I've had. It's selfish and what you're going to do when you're older.
Yeah. I would say they probably are the two main ones. I've also had comments about my parents and how it's not give them grandchildren, or they must be really disappointed in me.
Yes, Erin, that is so true as well, because I do carry that around with me as well, that I haven't given my parents grandchildren of from my side. My brother, I'm lucky enough to have a brother that's I've got two lovely nieces, so they have got grandchildren. But from my perspective, for a long time, I did feel guilty that, and like I disappointed them. And I remember having that conversation with my parents: have I disappointed you not having children? And they were like, my goodness, Claire, absolutely not. They've seen the trajectory of my life and how I live my life. And they say, they said to me, there's absolutely no way that we would want you to have had children because you wouldn't be able to live your life the way you live it. And your happiness is the most important thing.
And I think, I've been very much the same. Like my parents have never said anything like that to me, like, oh, we want grandchildren or anything like that. It's always been other people that have put that onto me and onto them. And like, I'm an only child as well, so there's nobody else to give them grandchildren if I don't do it. But yeah, I've been lucky, as I say, they never said anything to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you're an only child, and the pressure there is even greater. As I said, my brother has children, so I was let off the hook a little bit. But I think one of the things I said on your live as well was part of the reason that I think you said you always knew that you didn't want children. You just said that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. Have you always known that you didn't want children? And yours is yes, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I always say that it's just always been that gut instinct, and I always look at it that overwelming urge that some people do have to have children. They just know in themselves, I want to have children. I just always say that I've got like the opposite of that I just like, that's not for me. I'm not up to doing that.
And I think
sorry, go on.
I think the strange thing for me, and this is why it's taken me a long time to get my head around it, is I was never, no, I don't really want them. And I think if we were to look back at the way I grew up and the person I was, and you went back and asked some of my schoolmates and some of my school friends from university, would Claire have children? They would all have given a resounding yes, because it wasn't something that I always said, oh no, I don't want. And I definitely wanted them up until the age of about 25. And then even when I met James, there was a part of me again that thought maybe I do. But I think one of the things that I felt really healing for me to share was when I was 26, 27, I had an ectopic pregnancy. And I nearly wasn't here because of it. So I nearly lost my life because of it. And for most people, when they're told that their chances, I could still have had children. I had my fallopian tube out. But for most people, being told that their chances would be a bit more difficult potentially would make them want to go for it even more and think, yes. But that was my defining moment where I remember thinking, I don't feel sad. I don't feel sad at all. It's almost like there was a pressure off me, because I'd had this thing in my head of, do I really, really want them? And what would my life be like with them? And then when that came, it was a moment of, do I want them or not? And it was a really heartfelt, no, not really.
Yeah. I think sometimes, I know, say conversations we've had before, I think sometimes it's not until you're in a situation that you really know how you feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from that point onwards, again, I said this to you on the live, my baby has been my business and my work, and the reason I'm here, and the reason, you know, the gift I want to give to as many people as possible is to help them and to live my best life and be able to be there for people, to support them, and to help them grow and become the best versions of themselves. That's my baby. And I know that if I didn't have that, I had a child, all of my focus would be on the child, understandably, as it should be, and then it wouldn't be on serving as many people in the world as possible.
Of course. And I think, you know, I think something that comes up for a lot of people is like this idea of leaving a legacy. And I think you can leave a legacy in more than one way, you know. And I think the fact that you are obviously, with what you're doing, impacting lots of people's lives, I think that's a pretty great legacy to leave.
Bless you. Yeah. And I know, you know, and again, something else that we said was, if we were to have children, I know that I would love that child so much, that focus, as it should be, like I've said, would just be on that child. But there were so many other things that were competing with me internally that I really, really wanted to share with the world. And I suppose I don't really remember when that decision happened, but I was like, no, it's about what the legacy I leave in the world, with regards to how many people I've been able to serve and help and support, rather than bring another human being into the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely found that as I've got older, more and more things have just like compounded that decision to not have children. That as I've become more aware of things. So like, I've always said I wanted to run my own business, and like you said, not that, like, there are loads of people out there who run their own businesses and have children, but I feel like I would, whether it was a business or a child, I would want to be in a position almost like an all or nothing kind of thing. You know, I want to be dedicated to one thing or the other, and I think to dedicate myself to the level I would want to, I don't think I could do both. It would be an either or scenario, definitely.
Yes, and I just feel frustrated, to be honest, that I wasn't able to give. I know I see this with so many of the mums that I work with, I do have the pleasure to work with. You know, a lot of that, they do feel a sense of guilt, that they're also wanting to build their business, build their empire, build their profile in a business that they work in, but they're constantly competing with their heart, to a sense, and to a degree, that they want to spend it with their child as well. And that level, I think, again, we said this on your live, it's, I could almost see what was going to come. I could almost foresee the future and know how I would be and how I would react, and the frustrations and the battle that would be within me to be the best mum I could ever be. Because when I want to do something, it's got to be the best, which isn't always a good thing. But, you know, I would want to be the best mum. And then I've always wanted my own business as well. I've always been so ambitious and so wanted to be so successful and share my voice and share my story. And I know that I wouldn't have been able to do both very well.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, like, a lot of people, I think, could hear that and think, well, that's almost like proof of being selfish, because you know, you're thinking you want your business and your business is for you and things like that. But I disagree, because I always think it's not about, I don't think you can be selfish towards someone that doesn't even exist yet anyway. But I think as well, it's not always about being selfish. It's about being self-aware, and like you knowing how you would react in that situation, in the same way that I know that I would react in that situation. It's not that I'm not willing to consider other people, care for other people, but impact a child has on your life is probably bigger than any other commitment you are likely to make in your life. And that it just completely changes the way you live and how you can work and what you can and can't do. And I think if you know that that's not going to bring out the best in you, then you're probably better off to not do it.
I know. And I think you're so right. And I think a lot of people, and again, it's their choices. They wouldn't have it any other way. Like I wouldn't have it any other way. But some people do go ahead and have children and aren't necessarily very self-aware and don't know the implications it's going to have. And they wouldn't have it once they've grown up and they've gone through it. Or I'm sure they wouldn't have it any other way. But I was self-aware enough to think, you know, I don't necessarily want to be pulled in all these different directions. I don't necessarily want, here's the big thing, I don't necessarily want to bring a child up in today's society.
Oh yeah, that's a big one for me, definitely.
It's a massive one. And now I realise that was simmering under the surface completely subconsciously without me really knowing, was having a sense, this was going kind of a bit uber spiritual, but having a sense that the world in my time, in this age, it was going to change. I had a sense of that even when I was a young child, that we were going to be on Earth, I was going to be on Earth at a time when it changed dramatically. And look at the technology that we have now. Like children are constantly bombarded with social media messages of being the trauma and the stress it puts on children now.
Yeah, it's
social media, tech, it's absolutely, and I don't think I could have seen my child go through that. I think I'd be a complete heap of worry constantly.
Yeah, I would definitely. It's something that, so I'm still friends with a couple of girls that I went to school with. So obviously we grew up, you know, same time and everything. And something we've all said is we are so thankful that we didn't have social media when we were at school.
Yeah.
So thankful, because it's great. Like, you know, social media is basically how we met, and I've met some amazing people and it can be so positive. But I think particularly for children and teenagers, like I just can't imagine what it's like to have to deal with that as a child, but also then as a parent. Like, how do you monitor that? Like, I know that my gut instinct would be to say no mobile phones, no social media. That's what I would want to do. But that's so hard then when they're going to school and all their friends are doing stuff, or they, you know, they're all got mobile phones and they haven't. And I also know how that has the potential to play out with bullying and feeling left out. So it's like, how do you make that balance? It's so difficult. I
know. And you mentioned bullying there. I mean, I was bullied at secondary school in the first few years I was in secondary school, and it was an all-girls school. It was an all-girls grammar school. It was absolutely horrendous. I mean, I hated going to school and I have looked back and thought, I wonder if that plays out into me not wanting to have children, because that was harsh enough. But like you say now, with social media and trolling and all of this stuff, I just don't think, having experienced that myself without that extra layer of complexity, how would I feel seeing my son or my daughter going through that? It would almost be too painful.
Yeah, I know I would definitely really struggle with it a lot.
Yeah. And then one of the other things, and I wanted to ask you as well, actually, let me ask you that now. What are some of the, obviously, because you run this amazing community, and you've mentioned things when I read out a little brief intro to you, you mentioned loneliness and you mentioned judgment and all those sort of things. What would you say are the most common challenges a lot of women that have chosen not to have children do experience in the world and the community that you're involved in?
I think, well, as I say, like other people's opinions are definitely probably the main one, because I think how we react to, it's interesting to see how we react to, well, the difference between men and women is something you and I have spoken about. Like how Ross and James get reacted to is very different often to how we would be reacted to. But I think so it's like, if you choose to have children, that's sort of that is essentially still the norm, you know, like that's what the majority of people do, and that's fine. People are okay with that. If you don't have children through circumstance, so whether that's miscarriages, infertility, your own health, whatever it might be, people don't tend to react badly to that, because it's like they know what to do with that. Like their instant reaction is often they will feel sorry for you, or they will sympathize with you, and that kind of thing. But I think when you're choosing to voluntarily not have children, that's when people perhaps find that unusual and don't know how to react, but then feel that they somehow should say something. And I think that's when the judgment and the criticism can come out, and like really harsh comments. I think the fact that it's so common to be told you're selfish, like under any other circumstance, to throw that at someone would be considered really hurtful. And but it gets said all the time. And I think it's almost like there's something wrong with you. Like that's how it feels. That's how it comes across. There's something wrong with you. You're not natural.
You must have had trauma. Or you must have had, you're unnatural. It's odd not to. And when you get asked that, you're not a proper woman. Yes, that's a huge thing. Talk a little bit more about your experience of that.
I think, I mean, nobody's actually like said those exact words to me, but I have had people say, like, do you not think, like, that's not very feminine behavior. That's not like, and it's really common to be told that it's not very likely that you'll find a partner because nobody's going to want a woman who doesn't want children. I just find it really bizarre that people, despite how far we have come in terms of equal rights and sexism, I think when it comes to children, and particularly women having children, I think we've still got quite a long way to go, actually, based on some of the reactions that I've had. I mean, I've heard some much worse reactions to other people. I think really I've been quite lucky in the grand scheme of things. But people get excluded from things all the time, and I think that's where the loneliness thing,
yes, I agree,
comes in. People feel like they're excluded from stuff because friends and family start having children, and then suddenly you're not invited to family gatherings or parties or birthdays. And they're like, oh, well, you don't want kids, so we didn't think you'd want to come. Like, just because I don't want children doesn't mean I won't go to your child's 5th birthday party or something. That's those two things are completely separate. You still want to be included and feel like you're part of your friend group or your family. You don't want to just be written off.
No, I completely agree. And you can feel like it is less common not to want to have children. So you do feel like the odd one out. You do. It kind of, you stand out. It's a bit like the black sheep in the family, or you stand out a bit like a sore thumb in the family. And people, you don't feel like you're very understood, and you're kind of slightly ostracized. It's like slightly on the outskirts of everything. Does that make sense?
It does.
You're slightly on the edge of being really belonging to that group and that community of people anymore. I've definitely had the whole, well, I've seen it. I've never had someone say it in these exact words, but it's been implied that it's not very feminine. Exactly the same thing. It's not very feminine. Or it's very it's very masculine. Is there something wrong with you that you just don't want to? You're here on Earth, Claire. You're here on Earth to procreate. No, I'm not actually. Just because I can, it doesn't mean that I should. But that's the thing, isn't it? You've got that jumped into your head that because you can, you should, and that's just the norm. And obviously, that's how the human race has evolved. And you're somehow not part of how the human race evolves because you're not choosing to have children.
Yeah. And something I've heard a lot, and I know a lot of other women get it as well. I don't know if you have, but it's that people saying, oh, you regret it when you're older, like when you've missed your chance, kind of thing.
You've missed your chance.
And I'm quite happy to say, yes, I might do. I don't know how I'll feel when I'm 60. I might get there and think, you know what, maybe I should have. But that's a risk I'm willing to take. I would rather get to 60 and regret not having a child than have a child and regret that. I just think that would be horrific for me.
Then you are responsible for another human being, and we know the impact that parents have on their children. It's a massive responsibility. Most people don't take it seriously enough. So you're bringing another human being into this world, and I genuinely feel that if you're not prepared for it and you're not self-aware enough, there are going to be things passed down to that child. And if you do regret it, and I mean that's just horrendous. And here's the thing, I'm going to say this on the record, I have had friends, and this is fine, and I know that some of James's friends have said this, like, it's really hard having children. It's really hard, and sometimes, not all of the time, sometimes they feel that they would like their life without it. But no one goes out and says that. No one goes out and says that, and it's okay that they say that. But again, there's a lot of stigma for those parents that are really honest and say, my goodness, it's really hard work, and sometimes I just wonder what my life would be like without it.
It's like I know I said to you when we met for a coffee before you went away, that the way I look at it is pretty much any other commitment or decision you make in your life can be undone. Like if you suddenly woke up tomorrow and thought, I don't want to be married to James anymore, it can be undone. You can, or if you want, you decide you're going to live somewhere and you don't like it, you can move. You take a job that you don't like, you can look for a new one. But once you have a child, that's it. You can't get 3 years down the line and say, oh, I'm not really sure about this. No, and it's a massive, maybe I always overthought the responsibility of it, but I'm glad I have. And you saying about getting to an age where, I might regret it. I mean, I'm 42, and if I did want to start thinking about having children, it should be now. So, I have had moments where, and this is a good thing, I have thought, and speaking to you a couple of weeks ago, it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience for myself of, is this still the right thing? Am I just being, going along in my world without really thinking about these things? Because actually there will be a point at which it's too late. So let's have another think about this, Claire. And I had a chat with James, and it's still exactly the same. I've got too much to do in the world, for myself and for other people, to have a child now at this time in my life. And I know it would be a lot harder in your 40s, physically as well. But yeah, who knows? Like you said, I'd rather regret that decision when I'm older than to regret, to just not think about it and not think about the responsibility. That child should be on your mind and will be on your mind for the rest of your life. And it is. Here's the thing. People say, it's not your responsibility for the rest. It would be for me. I know that I would love it so much that there would never be a waking moment after that point where I didn't feel responsible for it. Yeah. I think you would always worry about them to some degree. Like even when they're, even when they're 40, you like that you would still be concerned for them and want the best for them. Definitely.
Exactly. And one other thing, one of the other things that I've seen in the field that I'm in at the moment, peri-menopause and menopause, and I know this was something that someone commented on your live, that there's the mummies menopause tribe as well. So again, this is some of the stuff I'm seeing in the field that I work in, is that there isn't really anything. There's a lot of women talking about menopause and their children, and there's not a lot of support specifically for women that are going through perimenopause and menopause that don't have children. It can feel, because your body's changing, and it marks the point at which it's too late. It marks the point at which you can't have children anymore. There isn't very much support, as far as I can see, for women that have chosen. Obviously it's their responsibility, they've taken that choice. There isn't much support for those women that have decided not to have children and are going through the point at which their body's telling them that that's not on the cards for them anymore.
You can't do that anymore.
So that's quite an interesting thing that I'm seeing. Obviously there are some symptoms that I'm going through, perimenopause for sure. And so the more I'm doing, and I'm in this field, I'm seeing that there is that kind of mum's menopause group of people. And I've even, as I said, I've experienced, they won't understand. If you're talking about peri-menopause and menopause and you've not had children, then women won't relate to you.
Yeah, I find that so strange, because
we're all going to go through menopause.
Yeah, like we haven't had children, but it's still going to happen. And I think actually what you're doing is really interesting, because like you say, there's not much support in terms of for those who haven't had children, because I can see how there's the potential for that to hit, and that's when you'll start thinking, oh no, maybe I should have had children.
Yeah,
like you say, because that's your body saying, well, you can't anymore. So I can see that there's the potential, like regardless of how confident, like I feel really sure in my decision, but I'm not stupid enough to think that potentially in a few years' time, when menopause hits, that I won't find myself thinking, uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. I know, and there just doesn't seem. I can hear the banging outside now. Yeah. So Erin, it's fine. Erin's in central London, but I was saying to her, it's so funny when we were in central London as well, just before we came to Marbella 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and it would happen. It was like clockwork. So because people haven't gone on holiday, they're all spending money on their houses, and ours is like London was like just one. The workmen were just everywhere. There was always building work going on up and down our street, like proper hammering through concrete. And you're trying to do live coaching calls, you're trying to do live podcasts and interviews, even corporate work. And you're like, oh my goodness, sod's law that as soon as you try and record anything.
So many houses around here having worked.
I know. And you try and park your car outside and there's just loads and loads of lorries and trucks and everything. No, so it's as always, Erin, it's been such a massive thing to talk to you. It's so helpful. And I think actually one of the other things I was going to say, I just wanted to touch on before we go, another part of me that I looked at having spoken to you was the guilt for being able to have children, and then looking at people that you know really, really want them, and you're telling them that you don't want children, but they really do, and they can't. There is a huge part of myself that has felt so guilty and so bad, saying out loud to these poor women that are just struggling to have children, I don't want them. I mean, they must, because you think, what must they be thinking of me? What must they think of me? How lucky are you that you can have them and you don't want them?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely felt that with two people in particular, and this is not a judgment on them. They've never actually voiced any of that to me. No. This is me,
it's me.
Like, you're thinking, oh my goodness, they must hate me, kind of thing. And I remember the first time, so one of them in particular, she wanted to have children and she can't. Now, obviously, I've never tried to have a baby, so I don't actually know if I can, but in theory, and I remember for a long time, I never told her how I felt about having children, because I knew what she was going through.
Same.
And I thought, how can I possibly tell her? I mean, like, she's one of my closest friends. We've known each other for a really long time now. And I just thought, how can I possibly tell this woman that I don't want to have children when I know she wants them so badly that she's going through IVF?
I know, hon.
And I felt awful. And when I did tell her, she's completely fine with it. And she said, but that's your life, Erin. That's
and it's like you said, it's my stuff. It's my stuff. And it's just it does come from societal expectations that, you're a woman, so you should procreate, blah, 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 blah. And if you're lucky enough to be able to do it in today's society, then you should, because there's plenty of women that can't and are going through the trauma of IVF. And that, that's exactly the experience I've had. I've had someone, there's people that I can think of right now that I have worried about voicing my opinion about having children. And I've never said that I don't want them. I think people have obviously presumed by now that it's not going to happen for me. But yeah, it's It's funny, isn't it? And then that kind of creates a wedge between two women.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to pop that in there at the end there, because that's another point that other women listening to this podcast episodes might be able to relate to as well. I'm sure they'll be able to relate to so many things that we've spoken about. And as always with this podcast, you know, please reach out and, you know, let us know what your thoughts are and your feelings around this. Because, and Erin, obviously, can you tell the listeners, like, how, if this really resonates, how they can find you, how they can join your community?
So I'm most active on Instagram. That's my favorite platform. So my handle is @the childfree lounge. And if you go there, you will also find a link to join the membership in my bio as well. So it's open at the moment. We reopened on the 22nd of November. So yeah, so doors are open. Come and join us, and we'd love to meet you.
And I think I'm going to be doing something in January as well, which would be so exciting. So, you know, that would be such a pleasure to do that inside your community. So I'll be in there. But Erin, thank you again personally for helping me open up about my story, and also for the work that you're doing, and to be so courageous and brave to put yourself out there and help a lot of women that are feeling exactly the same as we have done.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really good to talk to be able to have, you know, the opportunity to talk about it is brilliant. So thank you too.
Thank you, Erin. I'm sending you lots of love. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. Mwah.
Yeah. You've been listening to the Midlife Mentors with Claire and James Davis.
We'd love to hear from you. So drop us a line at info@themidlifementors.com with any questions or topic suggestions.
And make sure you join us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find us under the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.